Hello, the mean team here, and welcome to some military buildup. I've been reviewing the comments, and one of the comments actually is pretty relevant to today's segment, and that is the question, the mean team, how do you decide to build up military using the different ways, and when do you do it? And that's a difficult question to answer. I'll start off by going over what my decision process was in this game, and then I'll give some other general examples. Alright, in this game, I noticed that my opponent lacked a key strategic resource, and in an earlier era at that. No horse for the AI, and yeah, I forgot arch right there. So, I didn't have access to drafting or, Kremlin whips, or rush by. So in this case, I had to rely on traditional hammers. So really the question was, do I whip, or do I use normal hammering through mines? Well, as you can see, this map has a lot of hills and not a lot of food. So I chose to mostly work the mines. It really wasn't efficient to whip in really any of my cities, I don't believe. So in this case, I just mined and just hammered out all my crossbows, trebuchets, well actually, chokanus in this case. Now, when would you do differently? Well, there's a couple times. One of them is when you're lacking strategic resources. You're really not going to be able to fight too effectively in the medieval era unless your opponent's also completely lacking strategic resources, but then it's just a bunch of, slogging along and really kind of bad for both sides. So in that case, you might want to wait for rifles. And if you want to get to rifles quickly, you're going to be using a lot of specialists in addition to whatever cottages you have for bulbing. And in that case, you're going to have several cities set up for food. And that would kind of lead you towards drafting. Now, alternatively, if you have a good shot at communism and you have other reasons to go out to communism, then you might give Kremlin whipping or Kremlin rush by a look. And if you're just cottage all over the place, like say you're financial or for some other reason you just run a bunch of cottages, that's when you look at rush by. And unfortunately, I can't give you more solid guidelines than that because it's one of those things that you look at game to game, and very frequently multiple options will work in a given game, and it's just a question of what you want to do, how the AIs are doing, and so forth. It might even matter, it might even vary game to game whether you should be hammering things out or waiting if you were to replay the same map, for example. So it's a bit of a tough evaluation. But I guess when in doubt, just specialize hammer cities and build military, and that should generally keep you okay. Now, that's something else that came up in the comments. How do you specialize cities? There are three kinds of cities, viewers. Actually, only three kinds. One of them is commerce, which either relies very heavily on trade route commerce and passive tiles like gold mines, gem mines, or Colossus Coast. Those are commerce city types. There are hammer cities, which basically work enough food to work as many hammer tiles as possible. Or if you're in the early game and you don't have a lot of hills for mines, and your workshops are still bad, then you just farm what you can in those cities and whip out of them. Try not to stack too much whip anger. I mean, sometimes it's alright, but try not to stack too much or else you won't be able to use the city very well. And the third kind of city is the Great Person Farm. Great Person Farm is sort of like a whipping city, except for you don't whip in it. Maybe certain infrastructure like the kinds that let you run specialists at all, like the library early in the game to get your early great scientists, or maybe later on your observatories, markets, grocers, that kind of thing. You might consider whipping. Markets and grocers are a little bit unorthodox, though. Alternatively, after the library, well, the first thing you build in almost every city is granary, and that's true for all three. But after your library and courthouse, granary, that kind of stuff, Great Person Farms can really go straight to specialists if you want. Your best one obviously is going to have National Epic. You don't want too many because there's very sharp diminishing returns for Great Person Farms. So you really only want a couple. And your best one, you want either a National Epic or you want to be in pacifism for it. So just farm it up, grow to the cap that you think you can manage for specialists, and then just run a bunch of specialists using cast, using building slots, whatever. So those are the 3 kinds of cities. And notice that for really all 3 cities, food is an important component. You need food to grow onto your cottages, you need food to work hammer tiles and whip, and you need food to run a bunch of specialists. So always, well, not always, but try your hardest to settle the cities near a good food resource or have enough food potential that you can grow them and make use of them in one of those 3 regards. As for choosing which city can do which, again, that's one of those things you have to make a judgment. And there's nothing I can tell you here that's going to make you decide correctly every time. You'll have to figure it out on your own. However, my recommendation is that you initially start picking sites that are the best for a given type of thing. Like, obviously, you wouldn't want to try to run only cottages in your hill city when you don't have a lot of other hill cities. So, okay, you only have 1 or 2 hill cities, those are your production cities. And then, your next best cities, maybe cottages, maybe specialists, depending on what you need. And whether or not you're financial and quite a number of other factors will help you decide how to prioritize and specialize your cities. And specialization is important because it lets you build up military, even kill AIs outright, while still maintaining a reasonable tech pace, especially with the trades on. And here, at this point, we had Dan Q switch out. He quit being Zulu and switched into Tokugawa, so that he could have a fighting chance in this game. I guess he was either in war trouble, or I think he was. It was more so just a question of him overexpanding and not playing a start correctly. So once again, when I can really see that land, I'll talk about it a little bit more. But for now, we're just waiting for him to rejoin. And yeah, for the footage I got all of it. So anyway, let's have a look. I have a couple questions along the lines of my favorite leader traits. I'm kind of neutral to all the traits now. I really didn't like Protective for the longest time, but I've had a couple games recently where I've tried using it to its potential. In other words, just seeing if I could survive with only longbows stacked up in a city with City Garrison 3. And the answer is yes. The AI is really bad at war, and it will suicide into those longbows. And if they're on a hill, they start fighting like they're better than rifles that would be shown on flatlands. They're just incredible. And Protective doesn't do a lot for you economically, but really the variance between traits in this game isn't that great. What matters a lot more is your start and how well you play. So there's that. So really, my favorite traits are probably the ones that give me the greatest convenience, which is spiritual and probably either organized, since you don't need to do anything to leverage it, or creative, because it just saves hammers early and lets you get your really great people. There's our look at the start for Dan Q. And you'll notice that he has one good seafood city, really awesome seafood city, rice, which is only okay, and otherwise a lot of hills. I would argue he could have expanded even faster, potentially. Now, that's dangerous, but with that kind of seafood, you can get very early liberalism, even in this kind of game. He's also a candidate for Great Lighthouse, and if he has copper, Colossus. Those 2 things would have also really given his start a lift. But probably the biggest thing that he should have done that he didn't was abuse that capital. And you can run so many specialists there. I mean, I didn't count it up, really. I guess I could go back and count it up and maybe say it later, I don't know. But probably over 7, 8 specialists just in that city, which would have been able to get him to liberalism. I mean, you can get 5 great people in under 50 turns that way, possibly. So that's really the way to go there. He could have either settled them or just gone for bulbs. If he decided to go bulbs, astronomy would have been a good call, or liberalism, one or the other. And in this map, I would probably prioritize astronomy because of the trade routes he would have had available to him then. And plus, he could have pulled some cheesy garbage on the AIs and using that, possibly even fielded attacks against Hannibal sooner. As for why, well, there's no field cross. I was about my unit choice on Pakal here. He has no counter for crossbows because he's a horse. So I'm really looking my chops here, especially because of the culture pressure. That's really annoying me. And it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to attack him in this video, but soon, viewers, soon. I've covered about it as much as I can for the allotted time I have in this video, so I'll meet you guys in the next one. Once again, let me know what your questions are, and I'll do my best to cover them.